How are you guys? Good. All right. Hey, Jamie, you can tell whoever that was. It's not going to be live, but it will be available on the website once we get it recorded. Good evening, everybody. How is your June going? You only got 2 days to talk about so far. So far, so good. All right. Well, we have this, of course, this is busy time of the year when it comes to our world of bees. And so I'm not sure exactly what happened. A guest speaker that we had scheduled to be here was not able to for some reason. And so Sean and I the other day talking about a lot of the things that have been going on in the last couple of months. A lot of our new beekeepers, we're getting lots and lots and lots of questions, especially since all of the nukes were installed in just a few weeks back. And then all of a sudden, this world of this fun, idealistic world of I want to be a beekeeper became very real, and for several, and so, but it's been fun to walk through all the different things, all the growing pains that are happening in the beginning and everything, and so any of you, if you've been sending questions in, keep sending them. We love it, and we want to do everything that we can to help you out. And so tonight, we're basically going to take the time to just answer questions the best we can. And so something that you are dealing with, something that maybe you see coming that you're not sure if you're ready for, or something that you have seen in your hive that you're trying to understand exactly what is that, or what do I do? Those that have just installed their nukes, maybe questions about feeding, or as they're growing. As many of those that have put in nukes are already putting on additional boxes. Some are, some aren't. And so lots of stuff going on. And so we're just going to take tonight to talk about some of those things. We've got a lot of minds in the room who have experience and dealt with a lot of stuff. So if I'm not able to help you out, somebody here can. And so that's one of the great blessings of this group. So start off with, and I don't have my calendar or anything up here. Field day next month is on July. No, I'm looking. Oh, wait a minute. It's June. It's this month. June 18th. So just a couple weeks. You have written down what that was going to. Okay. We did drone marking last time, and so we probably won't need to be doing that. But walking through hive inspection, especially for beginners, as your boxes are growing and they're filling with bees, and just exactly what do I need to be doing when I open that top up? How do I systematically and with intention go through my hive? We're not just opening the box up to go, oh, bees, and kind of trying to guess what's what, and you want to go into that with a plan. Too many times I've gone into my bee yard to do inspections or look, just kind of see what's going on without a plan. And those are usually the days that I end up in panic mode, because now I don't have something that I need, or I needed an extra box, so I didn't have that, or I needed some extra frames, I'm not ready for those. Or like this last time when I went through a hive up here, all of a sudden when I went under, I'm for the first time using queen excluder this year, and so when I went under the queen excluder into the brood boxes, pulled that first frame out of the brood box, and I look at, oh, that looks like good brood. 7 queen cells along the bottom of the frame. It had been about 14 days since I had been into the brood box, which was a little long this time of year. But everything was fine. The last time I was in there, I thought this will be great. They've got plenty of space. I've been adding boxes. They've been filling it with honey. Everything seemed to be great, that they had plenty of room, so I wasn't too concerned about it. I should have been more concerned about it. And the thing is they were all sealed, all capped. So chances of getting them to not do what they're doing is almost next to impossible. So I just went ahead and left them alone. Thought, well, my workforce, I think they'd already swarmed. And because the numbers of bees had gone way down, and so, another one of those things. But all of those, when you get into our bee yards, we open up, and sometimes you just never know the ideal. We know ideally what we want to see, but that's not always what we find. And so, what do I do next? That's always the question. So, I want to open it up. Anybody, is there anything that you have been wondering about, something you're dealing with that you've got some questions about? Anything that you just kind of start a topic, and we'll talk about it and until we're done dealing with that, and then we'll move on to something else. What you got?
You mentioned the queen excluder.
Okay.
So I bought the nuke and I just put a second box on. Just
Right.
And I've heard it's good, territory bees cut down their life. What's the read on that?
Again, it's another, depending on which beekeeper you talk to, you're gonna get a different answer. Queen excluders have been used for a long time. Most commercial guys use them. Don't have much trouble, don't have trouble with them. Jamie Ellis, the Bee Lab at the University of Florida, they've done some studies on those. One of their podcasts, they talk about so queen excluders, is it doing damage to the bees or not? And in their research, he said, I can't really find where it's really making much of a difference. Now, sometimes in a hive, maybe it's because a queen excluder, the spaces are a little smaller than normal for some reason. They might not want to push through it. The one I've got on my hive, I sat and watched them the other day to see what they were doing. And they weren't having to squeeze through too much. They were able to make it through that pretty easily. It wasn't a challenge for them. But there are a lot of people that over the years say, well, it damages their wings, it wears on them when they're going through the queen excluder, things like that. But according to the research that's been done, which there hasn't been a lot, but the word is there's not much of a difference that's taking place, if there really is any. And so again, you can go find the Two Bees in a podcast from the University of Florida and just search for queen excluder in that podcast, and you'll be able to find them talking about the studies and research that they've done on those things.
Have they done anything on plastic versus metal excluders?
They talk about it, but I don't know. I don't know if in their research if they used metal and plastic to see a difference or not. Right now, I'm using plastic. I'm just using a flat piece, plastic piece. I think you can get it at Atwood's. That's what I bought those when I made a queen excluder for my long hive, where I cut out one of my divider boards and I attached the queen excluder piece to that, and it worked really well in there. And so that's why I had them, and it seemed to be working. Until whatever this queen event that's going on now in my hives took place, they were putting on the honey. We were in a flow around here, and because I ended up within 10 days adding 2 boxes, and because they were packing it in, and so they were not having any trouble with that plastic one. Most, when you look at commercial beekeepers, they're using metal just because they last longer, they're more durable, and whether they're wood framed or not, I think most commercial beekeepers I've seen use them are not wood framed. They're just a metal. But I don't know. I don't know about, they talked about the different kinds, but I don't know what that translated into the research that they did.
I've wondered because I use metal in all my hives except my Aponace. And the Aponace are much rougher where bees will go through, so I
Right.
was curious if you saw it.
I do not like the Apamase queen excluder. That's the only thing about the Apamase hive that I have not liked, is I have not used their queen excluder because it is, it's a cut plastic, and so it leaves a rough edge around one of those edges, and that I think would do more damage as they're trying to get through that. So I have not used any of those. They're designed to fit perfect in there, and they do, but I have not been real pleased with those queen excluders. But anything else queen excluder? Yes.
So, adding my box, if I was gonna put one, should I put it there yesterday when I did it?
Well, that's going to depend on what your plan is for how you're going to arrange your hives. So, I'm guessing you're using a deep boxes. So if you've got a 10 frame deep, and are you going to try to go into winter with a double deep brood box going into winter, or are you going to go single deep? And so those are some of the questions that are going to you're going to have to think about when you're thinking about where am I going to put a queen excluder. If you are wanting to double up and have 2 deep boxes for going into winter, you do not want to put that queen excluder in there. If you are ready to start producing honey, and you don't want the queen to get up there and be able to lay brood in that box, and you're going to be good with a single deep, or even if you have an excluder in there and they fill that top box with honey, then you can take that excluder off later in the fall, and then allow them to have access, because the queen has to be able to move up in the wintertime as the rest of the colony does. So as that cluster moves around and up into that upper box, she has to be able to fit through that too. And that's been I've seen a lot of guys writing how it's like, oh, I left the queen excluder on over winter, didn't realize it, and now they're queenless because the rest of the colony moved and she couldn't go with them. And so those are just some questions to ask when you're looking at how do I want to. I have overwintered primarily in single deep boxes. I consolidate it all down in. I'll shake bees down into the bottom box, and I will a lot of times put a medium super on top of it, just full of honey, just to give them a little extra. But I have most of mine, I'll go through winter with just a single deep, full wall to wall of honey, and done really well. Going through, a lot of guys prefer to have a double deep going through winter, just to have that extra honey store that's there. So if you're just running mediums, usually you're running probably 3 mediums into winter. That's about like almost a deep and a medium together. So that's going to be the question of when and where do I put that queen excluder. If it's the nuke that you installed and they're growing, I would almost recommend probably just let them grow. Don't worry about the honey production this season, this year. Whatever they pack in, add a box, let them fill that. And then at least give them 1, if not 2 of those deeps to go all the way and go through winter in. And you shouldn't have to worry about them having enough food getting through winter. So probably the first year with that nuke, I don't know that I would recommend putting that queen excluder in.
One other thing to consider with the queen excluders too, is especially for newer hives, here again, that's 10 beekeepers get 12 answers, but my experience has been until you have a home built in that super, they won't go through the queen excluder to build a home. There has to be something developed up there to draw them up there. So I leave, whenever I'm putting a new super on, I never use a queen excluder until it's fairly well drawn out.
Even if you are even if you're checkerboarding, which I have been when I'm adding my supers on above the queen excluder, I've been checkerboarding. I've been doing the under supering, and so I'm checkerboarding the box just on top of the queen excluder and the next one up. So I'm not just adding a box on top, I'm actually taking all of them off and I'm under supering and then checkerboarding them full frame, empty frame, full frame, empty frame, full frame. And the box on top of it is just the opposite, empty frame, full frame, empty frame, full frame. But I've noticed, same thing what he was just saying, if you just have foundation above that queen excluder, because I checkerboarded a couple of just foundation frames in, and they haven't touched them. They're not drawing them out, and so that's a question. We begin a lot of questions from some of our newer beekeepers about how do I get them to draw some frames out, and some of the nukes have even had some struggle getting them to fill those 10 frames and getting them to draw frames out. Since it's warming up, since it's warmer now, one thing you can do is checkerboard into the brood box, so into the center of that. And what you'll do is drop a frame of, and I'm saying this not because I've done it a lot, but because Cayman Reynolds just did a video a couple weeks ago about this very thing, is where he'll just drop foundation frames down into, no more than 2, into the center of his brood box, because they will draw the comb out if it's in the brood box. But he doesn't leave it there for very long. He just waits until they start to draw it out. Then he pulls them out and moves them up into another box. Once they've started, then they will continue to add to it. And so it's just kind of forcing them into starting to draw that out by dropping them down into the brood part of the box, and because they look at that and they, well, we've got to draw this comb out here, but it just barely starting to draw it out. Then you can take those out, move them. You can drop a couple other foundation frames in. And for new beekeepers, the one thing you don't have that is one of the most valuable things that you need is frames with drawn comb. And so the more comb that you can get them to draw out, the better. If you are catching swarms, if you're going out and collecting swarms, swarms are the best comb drawers, because they know that's what they have to do when they get to their new home. So if you put them in a box, they are going to draw comb out better than anything else. So put a lot of foundation down in there with them, and they will serve you well in giving you some drawn comb that way.
Is that the method that Sean started?
What's that?
Is that the method you're talking about that Sean started?
With supering?
The checkerboarding?
Yes.
He's got one that's like 7.
Yeah. Sean just added box number 7 to one of his. And the picture he sent, he said, he's like, I have to tiptoe now to, and they're all mediums, 7 mediums. He said, I have to tiptoe to even see into the top of the top box. But that's the Dick Brickner, I'm calling it the Dick Brickner method because he's the one who's kind of been promoted on YouTube of doing it, of doing the under supering with the checkerboarding. And it was last month or a couple months ago, we kind of talked about that a little bit in a little bit more detail. But that's what I started doing as well, and they started putting on the honey. So there must be something to it. But again, it's a beekeeper, what you prefer to do. It takes more work, because instead of just adding a box on top, putting the lid back on it and being done, I have to take all of my boxes off all the way down to the queen excluder, and then pull out, put a new box in with 5 empty frames, take 5 full frames from, actually I'm doing 9. I'm doing, in my supers, I'm doing 9 frames. So they'll draw those out a little bit fatter. And so I'm just checkerboarding those in, then I gotta put all those other boxes that are full back on top. And so it takes some more time, it takes more effort, but it seems to have a good result. So.
You run 10 frames in the brood.
10 frames in
You
brood.
ever run 9 all the way in the brood up?
I have not. Dick Brickner, he talks about, he does. He does 9 all the way through. And I had the 10 in there already when I got started, and I thought, I'm just gonna leave the brood box at 10. And my brood box, because I'm moving away from deeps and into mediums. So right now I've got deep brood box. My brood box is a deep and a medium, and then the queen excluder on that. So what I'm hoping over winter, which probably won't happen because they won't do what I want them to do. But I'm hoping they'll come up out of that deep and into that medium over winter and be in that top box, so that next spring I can rotate that top box down, and now I can just go all mediums. And so I'm trying to transfer get all my deep stuff out. The only thing deep will have is my long hive. It's deep, and I'm using it just for queen rearing. And so that's going to be kind of a totally separate deal.
So why the transition from deep to medium?
My back is part of it. Those deep boxes get heavy. And I made the mistake, even though I was told before I started by my brilliant mentor, Mr. Sean. He said, choose what you want to do and do one size. Either do deeps or do mediums, because you end up with you got double the equipment because of all the different size stuff. And then what I'm needing now is there's several times already this spring I'd like to move some of these frames up and down in my brood boxes, and I can't. I can move the medium frames down, but I can't move the deep frames into the medium box. And so you're just kind of stuck, and you're able to, it just has a lot more flexibility when everything's all the same size. And when I'm teaching the class, those that took the beginner beekeeping class, I'd say the same thing. And I'm sure that there are probably several who did the same thing that I did and thought, I'll be all right. And there's one right there.
Yeah, the problem is now I've probably got 400 deep frames drawn out, so it's really hard to
Yeah, after you get,
transition because you lose such a valuable resource.
yeah,
Steam cut is down, and you're still using your deeps.
I am, yeah. I cut my deep frames to medium depth, and even the ones that were already drawn. And so I just cut them off and attached a new bottom board to the frame, and they seem to be working fine. But what really pushed me to get away was I lost a lot of my deep drawn comb to wax moths last year. I had horrible wax moths last year, and so a lot of my deeps were just devastated. So it was kind of that point of this would be a good time to make the transition. So
With regard to wax moths, so a friend of mine gave me some drawn comb. He goes, I don't need them. Clearly had moth damage on them. I put them in the freezer.
yeah.
They were in there for a few weeks. Is it safe to use?
It should be.
I mean, they've been in there for 6 weeks.
I would be more worried about other things than the wax moths.
Okay.
There are a lot of bacterias and a lot of viruses and things like that they can even survive some of those, putting it in the freezer.
Okay.
Like American foul brood, you can't freeze that to death.
Okay.
And so now that's not something that's common around here, but it's just one of those things that we always tell people to be very cautious taking equipment from other people, because you just never know what might be in the comb. Yeah, if you're for the wax moth, when you froze it, when you put them in the freezer, it took care of that. And the bees, they'll clean it all out, and they'll repair all the comb. Yeah. What else?
Okay, so here's the most basic question. Hive location.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a new nuke, got it all set up. My first hive was given to me. Folks got into beekeeping, the missus got stung horribly, and they're out of beekeeping. And
Come get them.
come get
today.
them. And so we did. And, oh, I've got the suit that most of us can't afford. I got all this stuff. I mean, they just said, go.
The dummies book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beekeeping for dummies and all that. So I chose a location for my new hive. Wound up to be, it was in the shade essentially. So I decided to move it. And I was successful with the trick that I found on YouTube about moving them and putting a branch in front. They come out, they're confused. It actually worked very well.
Yeah.
I successfully moved them 700 or 800 feet away. So in that, I mean, very questionable deal, but it worked. All's good. I make the move, everything's good, and then everything leaks out, and I'm still, they get the morning sun, but primarily they're shaded throughout the whole day. The hive seems lethargic. I wonder if that may have something to do with that.
Sometimes early morning, if they're in shade, then they'll be a little bit slower getting up and about and out without the sun, just bearing down on them, warming them up. Throughout the day, I mean, we recommend, you know, full to partial shade at most. We full shade. There's just a lot of other things within the shade. If the soil underneath it stays moist, then there's a lot more things with small hive beetle larvae and other things that can just cause you trouble.
Sure.
But in this part of the country, it's not as big of a deal as it is in some other places. So if you're in what you would still call partial shade, where they're getting some, probably shouldn't be that big a deal. It could just simply be that hive. I've got, you know, when I'll have 10 or 12 hives, and there's one of them that they're just a lot slower and don't have as much activity, and everything seems to be good, but they're just kind of a little more lethargic than some of the others.
Yeah, we had some children like that.
Yeah. Bees are kind of like kids, where they've all kind of, hives each have their own personality.
Right.
And so you're probably not a big issue.
Okay, good.
So what do you do on the 18th that you're talking about?
We do field days. Well, we're going to be focusing on hive inspection. So we'll get together, and what we'll do, I or someone else will, in either my bee yard or someone else's, we will just walk through, how do I do an inspection? How do I go through my hive? What am I looking for? You know, I remember when I was first learning, when Sean would come out and help, or I would go and watch him in his hives, and even just the way he used a hive tool. Because that's, I mean, it becomes an extension of your body as a beekeeper. It just, after a while, it just feels like it belongs there. You know, when you're first beginning, just watching him, how he would manipulate frames and things like that with a hive tool. And I walked away from that going, if that's all I learned, then I learned a lot, because that helped me to be able to do better just in being able to help me get into the frames and things like that. So you know, last time we did drone marking, which is practicing for queen marking. Drones don't sting, so it makes it a lot easier for especially newer beekeepers to reach their hands down in there in a frame of bees and pull out a drone and practice handling them. Because once you start to move to grabbing that queen, then you know, there's a little bit more at stake. And so, you know, how do you hold her? How do you manipulate her if you need to, and do it carefully? And you can do that all day with a drone, and you can realize that, you know, that it's really not that hard to do, and they're pretty resilient.
What do you mark her with?
Just a paint pen, and we'll just put a little dot on the thorax, and then wait a few seconds, kind of let it dry, and we would do that for for the next week or so, 2 weeks, going back into my hive, I had a bunch of white dots running all around my hive, all the drones. I knew which drones had not been successful in mating with queens because they were still in my box. So it was kind of a reminder of a fun day every time I went into my hive.
You know, being that you were given that hive, have you mite tested it?
What?
Have you tested for rural mite infestation?
No.
It might be something to consider.
Let's-
Are we gonna do that on the 18th?
Let's. We did one at the last one. We probably will. Let's talk mite testing. I am beginning to do mite tests just about once a month. And at least through the busy season. Right now is the time when varroa mites are beginning to peak. They're on the incline. Our honeybees, we're getting closer and closer to summer solstice. And so as soon as we hit the summer solstice, which is what, June 21st? Once we hit summer solstice, queens begin to slow down their laying. And so the bee population will begin to gradually start to decline, but the varroa population is on the rise. And so this time of year especially, it's important going on through the rest of the summer. And something that we as the board, we've talked about some things about even as a club trying to do some better varroa testing reporting so that we, not just in my yard, but in Benton County or Northwest Arkansas, get an idea of what's going on with varroa right now. And who has tested this year? Okay, that right there is a problem. And you're sitting where I was, because I was kind of the same way. I started thinking, well, I know I've got varroa, so I'll just treat. And so I'll treat, and I would treat in the spring, and then I'd treat in the fall, and I would use different treatments so that I didn't get resistance, and I was doing all of that. And the problem is when you're testing, one, when you treated, how did you know you even needed to treat? Because you may not have had levels high enough to treat. Every time you treat, no matter what you use, it is stressing your bees. And so, yes, it's made and it's packaged and it's tested to be safe for our hives. But we are kind of in a peculiar business of pest control because we are trying to get an insect with insecticide off of another insect. That's not something that very many other agricultural people are having to do. They're getting parasites and things off of, out of mammals, cows and horses and sheep and goats and all that kind of thing. We're treating insecticides on an insect to get another insect off of it. And so, yes, the levels are safe for your bees, but it still does a lot of stress to a colony. And I use Formic Pro or Mite Away Quick Strips, and you lay that on as soon as you set it on your frames. The bees tell you that we don't like this, and they get loud really fast, and because they're trying to get all of that out of there. And so if you're treating when they don't need it, you're stressing your bees more than they need to be stressed. But what if they needed, here's the second thing, what if your treatment didn't work? What if they were resistant to whatever you're treating with? So I treated with Hop Guard I tested in beginning of April. I was about a 2% mite load, which they say is under the threshold where you don't necessarily need to treat. Let's his name? Randy Oliver. If you've seen any of his stuff with scientific beekeeping, he stresses that if you ever have 1% or more, to treat. And so I went ahead and treated with Hot Guard. And then after that treatment of Hot Guard, I did another test, and I was down to 0.02 something percent of a mite load. So my treatment worked. But what if, for some reason, the mites in that colony, what if they were resistant to that Hot Guard? Or something happened to where it just didn't do what it needed to do? Or I didn't put it in exactly the way it was supposed to be put in, so it didn't work properly, something. And if I wouldn't have gone back and done another test after the treatment, then I might have had mite load rising, and I wouldn't have known it until I got to October, when I'm gonna do my fall treatment. And by then, it might be too late. And the more and more research and study that these guys are doing on mites, again, Jamie Ellis and the research and study that they're doing, he tells everybody to treat or to test every single month. What is it called? It's a group that is BIP, BIP. I don't remember what BIP stands for. BIP Research. I know that's what it is because I downloaded their app. Maybe it says if I open it up. Be informed something. Anyway, they have started a program nationwide for beekeepers to be able to order test kits to be able to actually send bees to them, and they will do the test. You do the alcohol wash and then package it in their little container, mail it to them. They will do your mite analysis, plus they will also do multiple other analysis to test for other parasites and diseases and things like that, and you get that for free. And it does cost a little bit to do it because they're a nonprofit, but they're just trying to get nationwide information on what's the varroa looking like, and their program is test every month, every month, every month. And
People with sensitivity test to varroa, so you pick the right product?
Well, that's not something necessarily that they would be able to test for, because that's going to be different based on your hives and what you've used and what the mites you've got are resistant to, that type of thing. That's going to be something that when you treat, if you don't do another test after the treatment, you have no idea if my treatment worked. I may be using, and I'm hearing more and more every year, beekeepers get into the spring and they're just like, my bees are gone. Or my hive's dead, or they've absconded or something along that line. And you talk to these guys